Welcome to Season 8 of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. Don't forget to subscribe or follow us. We're in Season 8, and we still have a lot to talk about. Radio Free 501c is supported by USAE News, the weekly community newspaper of Association CVBs and hotels. Learn more at usaenews.com. This week, we're welcoming a first-time guest. It's Christine Saunders, president and founder of Halmyre. We're having an important conversation. Association Relevance. Will you be missed? Don't miss this one. It's June 8th, 2026. Welcome to episode 331. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second week of June already. Hope you're having a great time here on planet Earth. And I want to thank you for taking some of your time this week to join us here at Radio Free 501c, which is the podcast of my company, Rogue Tulips Consulting. And I also want to give a shout out to our partner, USAE News, for supporting our podcast this year. Check them out at usaenews.com and look at all their subscription options. They are the paper of record for the association industry. And I am your host, Cecilia Sepp. I am the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting, and really having a blast as I get closer and closer to episode 350, which who knew years ago we would get that far, but we still so much to talk about. And today I have another first-time guest, which I'm always thrilled to welcome new people and hear new voices to contribute to our ongoing conversation about nonprofit management overall and specifically associations. And our topic today is association relevance. Will anybody miss you if your association disappears? And today's guest is Christine Saunders, and she is here to share some insights on that topic. But before we dive into the topic, Christine, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. This has been several months in the making. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Definitely, Cecilia. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great platform and a great way to connect with so many association leaders. So, as you said, my name is Christine Saunders. I am the president and founder of Halmyre. We are a consulting firm that specializes in associations. We help with value proposition, pricing strategies, and studying the voice of your future member. So a very specialized type of research. And those are the three keys of growth that we look for and help our associations with. Been in the association sector for about 14 years, so relative newbie to so many people we meet out there. But like so many people, I stumbled into it and just thought, this is the world for me. So happy to have been on this journey and love our work helping associations grow and stay resilient. And I can't wait for this exchange we're going to have today.
Yes, well, thank you. And yes, you're right. Nobody says when they're a little kid, when I grew up, I want to be an association executive. I know I wanted to be an FBI agent. So, but there you go. No, but I love it too. I've spent my entire career in some area of it. And so I also have a lot of thoughts about the relevance of what we do. But Christine, just to get the conversation started, what do you see as some of the things that could be an obstacle to an association staying relevant?
Well, I actually think the structure of associations themselves are the obstacle. So, associations are a tax and legal structure, so we can look at them through many lenses, but the tax and legal structure and the way most, and there are always exceptions, but the way most are structured through your member bylaws and the governance model just inherently creates deep blind spots. So the way we talk about this is, unlike other types of businesses, there is a separation of perspective. So the owners are different from the staff, are different from the customers, are different from sometimes the investors, if it's public or there's other. So everyone has a role to sharpen the perspective of the organization. That can collapse in an association because of its structure. Let's just review it. Your members are your governors, are your customers, are your owners, are your governors, are your customers. So you can get into this very tight, we call it the bubble, and you have to work extra hard to get outside of it to see what's happening because it's from the outside that's going to cause the relevance and the resiliency challenges. So it, and I can go into some detail about where those blind spots are, but it is the inherent blind spot of the structure itself that everyone is on the inside and everyone is talking to everyone else, and they maybe lose a little perspective on what's happening in the rest of the marketplace.
I think that's an excellent point. It's something I've also noticed over the years. I've been doing this a little bit longer than you, since late 1980s. I have been in some form of association or nonprofit management. And again, to clarify for the audience, associations are nonprofit too, because we're all 501c organizations. And what we see is the same thing happening. Lack of training, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of roles, lack of understanding of the nature of the 501c status and why we have it, and a lack of focus on what our mission is and our unique role in society. So I think you're right. We get in these bubbles, and because we're in our bubble, our micro bubble, let's say at our association, and then we're in that bigger bubble of the association segment of nonprofit management. And then that's the way we've always done it. And I think things tend to get too focused on emotional reactions to each other, like among all the different levels in an association, because we are in that bubble and we're in this thing that we're doing maybe as a volunteer or for not as much money if we're on staff, because it's nonprofit, which doesn't mean no money. It just means the money goes back into the organization. And so there's a lot of lack of understanding, in my opinion, across the profession of how things actually work and words being used incorrectly. But what I'd like to hear from you is your perspective on this. I find it a very 19th century model, late 19th century, early 20th century model in a 21st century world. And I think that's where we're seeing some conflict and obstacles and threats. So what do you think about that?
So it's interesting. I'd love to know why you date it in the 19th, 20th. I'm going to take a stab, and then maybe you can explain what you think a little bit more. My reaction to it's maybe an outdated model. I don't know that I say that the basic model is outdated. I think so. Here's where I'm going to go with that. The basic model, I think, is solid. I think in every society, certainly there are groups of people that want to come together to make things better. So what is an association? So this is the world according to me. What is an association? Association is a place where people come together to solve a problem more efficiently or effectively than if they tried to do it on their own. Okay. So the essence of that is they've got a problem, a need that they determine, well, I could try to do this on my own. If I'm a doctor practicing medicine, it makes sense to get to other doctors because I am seen to be a better doctor, or, what a doctor is better defined, or my education is easier, or tools that I need to do my practice are more readily available. So people come together to solve a problem more effectively or efficiently. I think that is always going to be the case. And I think groups of people, and I think, I'm not a historian, but if I looked in the march of history, that's a little bit about how we keep getting better and better and better. So that could be what you mean, but I'm interested about the outdatedness. I don't think that fundamental reflex is going to go away. I think the governance model makes it slow and contributes to gravity. And I don't mean in the importance way, I mean in the slowness way of helping associations take risk to adjust to how people do that in today's society. I'm going to pause there. Maybe you can build on that.
No, the need to associate is a human inclination. I totally support that. That's really what Alexis de Tocqueville was pointing out in Democracy in America, is we have the opportunity to associate and the right to associate, which people don't think about that. In the 18th century, you didn't always have that option.
You did not.
Because you might live in a different culture, different kind of government structure. Right. Maybe you're still like post-feudalistic, right? You're still like living that. But in America, people came together for barn raisings, or to build a new school, and then they went their separate ways again. It's very similar to the concept of the community of practice in associations today, where a group of members will come together to answer a question or solve a problem, and then the group disbands because the project is finished. Now,
Yeah,
where I come in and say, you know what, we really have this like old 19th century, early 20th century way of doing things, is because a lot of the models and structures that we use for governance and managing the business are based in that era.
for
And we
sure.
have not unshackled ourselves from that mindset.
That's
So
right.
we still have old ways of doing committees. We have outdated thinking about how we run our chapters and work with our chapters. We don't quite understand that affiliates are affiliates and not necessarily a chapter. So what
Right.
we have here is a 21st century world where communication flows instantly and freely, and you can get all kinds of information and knowledge about pretty much anything by clicking on your phone.
Yeah.
But we are still using these really long processes for making decisions, assigning volunteers, instead of embracing that initial energy of the desire to associate. And one of the things I see is a lot of groups that have come together as networks, and they're doing great as networks. They're like, oh, we should be a 501c organization. Is that really serving your purpose? There is a need for the 501c status, and there are times that a group should become a 501c, whichever one they need to be. But I am part of a group called the Nonprofit Consultants Collaborative, and we just formed, like, I guess about
Just
3 years.
network. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not ever going to organize in that way. We're never going to formalize, be a 501c. You want to know why? Because we're getting things done without that structure, because we come together to make something happen. And then that group, once that work is done, we move on to the next thing, and maybe a
Yeah.
different group will come forward. That's really embracing that energy of associate. And I think a lot of times this 19th and 20th century mindset and structure gets in the way of that energy. And it stops us from embracing what you see as the opportunities out there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, first time in my career anyone's referenced to Tocqueville back to me. I'm a political philosophy major, so high fives. Um, I do think the business structure, and I think that's what I was talking about, is inherently in the way. And you're talking about governance and the structure, way information flow. I would draw a distinction from associations who are just networks, and it's not just about coming together. Certainly, let's just agree in today's days and age, in snap your fingers and you can find your cohort around the world. It's not just that. And I think it goes back to, if I just wanted to tease out something I said before, it was to solve a specific problem or seize a specific opportunity that you can't do on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, so as long as it's not just networking, and now in your case you gave with your cohort, you may be doing that and you're doing it just fine. There does have to be a certain point when there's so much revenue is accrued, or there is a growth ambition of some sort, of some sort. And growth isn't always just a more revenue, but obviously if you have an organization that is earning more money than it, or driving revenue, then you need a tax class, and whether or not the 501c's are the right structure still, that's out of my lane. But I do think that for organizations that are driving revenue out of this, I think it does, and then I'm going to lateral into this. I think associations, we see this a lot in our pricing and revenue practice, associations who become too consumed with revenue. So they become growth must be more revenue. And I think that leads you away from, can allow for mission drift. So there are inherent problems in the governance that, are we here to grow more money? No, an association isn't always. Sometimes growth in money is important to, because you need to invest and
Right.
do other bigger things to solve a problem. But it's not the mission. However, I'm with you on the, let me just don't let me, profit is important if you're in that revenue driving framework. So
Right.
the modern, just simple networking, it's not good enough. You have to focus on the problem or the opportunity, and then you survive and thrive if there is a problem or opportunity that you can help a group of people solve, be it state, regional, professional, trade, international, whatever. I'll pause there. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I love all your observations, and I agree with them, despite my kind of different viewpoint on the antiquated systems we're using. I think our business model is
They're
okay.
tough. Let me interrupt. They are tough, and they are slow, and they are cumbersome compared to other types of organizations.
Yes.
What you talked about, the freely assembled people who on
Mhm.
the snap of the fingers can get together, or even for-profit businesses who
Yeah,
have much lighter burdens of governance. So allow me to
that's
agree with
right.
you for sure.
Yes, yes, exactly. So that's a good jumping off point for my next topic on this conversation, because that's really the thing. I have spent my whole career in nonprofit management in some role, whether it's been on staff or chief staff executive, or now I'm consulting again. So obviously, I see something of value here. And I don't want to see that lost. And I do agree with you 100%. The 501c status is necessary for the larger organizations that want to have a broader impact, especially social service areas. So, like when you're looking at the C3 sector, we definitely want that opportunity that people can help. When we're pulling together a business league or a chamber of commerce or a trade association, yes, we also want that opportunity, because all 501cs can make the world a better place. Now, where I see that we need some adjustments is our decision making, and that's governance, as you pointed out. Our governance structure is slow. One of the reasons it's slow and cumbersome is because we accept that. We say, well, that's just the way it is. It takes a really long time. It doesn't have to take a long time, it could take less time. Consensus is great, but when consensus gets in the way of decision and action, then that's a problem. And so we need to have the more I'm actually going back to these 90 words, Christine, agile and nimble, which we
Yeah,
wanted to be in the 90s. And we definitely need to be both of those in the 21st century, because leading up to my next topic that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, there's a lot of competition from for-profit membership groups. So, for example, Chief is a for-profit membership group. American Express tells me I'm a member, and I
awesome.
get benefits, right? So we have that topic, that title of member, that role of member in groups that are not 501c organizations. And so how do you see that as part of this roiling marketplace that 501cs are trying to navigate?
A couple things just to respond to, and yes, the concept of member is always a talking point, and it has been watered down, certainly from the 501c perspective. 100% agree. Everyone's like, well, maybe we should just have us like be like Costco, and I'm like, I'm not okay. Like, I may be, they may call me a member, but I don't feel like I've got an ownership stake in what's happening.
Right.
And
And can I interrupt you there
yeah,
on that Costco thing?
yeah.
Because I think too many associations use the Costco membership model. You
Oh
pay to
gosh.
pay. And whoever came up with that idea at Costco, it's brilliant. You get people to pay you to come in your store and buy stuff. So
Yeah, no, it's,
I love it.
and I don't, what I just, so just as a little spur off the conversation, I think it's a, I hate to say blanket statements, but all things being equal, a really tough business model for actual 501c6 is a bad business model, because you are then just a reseller and then you turn into a wholesaler. And I'm like, is that what your purpose and your mission is? Like, is your mission to sell stuff to people or sell engagement points? But anyway, that's a different sort of branch.
Mhm.
Coming back to it, I think the nimble decision making, you said something that really puts me on the hot seat or really fires me up, which is the word consensus. Someone asked me, we are consulting business, and in an an interview for a consulting engagement, they're like, well, how are you going to achieve a consensus? And I think I maybe lost the job right there, but I said, I'm not. I'm going to help you I'm going to help you make a good decision. I'm not guaranteeing everyone should feel great that the decision process was right, but that's different than getting consensus that everyone agrees. Consensus is, and I do think consensus is the death that springs out of another point about the governance. The consensus is safety, because boards are volunteers and they're inside, they already love the organization and they have no appetite for risk and they have no motivation for risk. Like,
Right.
if they take a risk, will they kill the organization? Will they look bad in front of their friends? Will they, like, is it going to cause them more work? They're not necessarily, and this is all things being equal, not necessarily as a class really incentivized to take risks. So, and executive directors or CEOs need to learn to push the board. And I think, so because you tend to have volunteers from within, remember I said the members are the governors of the customers, like they're just in this place of safety going, well, it worked for me for the last 20 years. They're also later career. And they're looking backwards and saying, well, it worked for me. And I don't want to shortchange the wonderful volunteers that are out there, but it's harder work and it's harder graft for a CEO or an executive director to push the board to make decisions faster, to not rely on, does everyone feel good about this? So those are some of the manifestations of it. And we do call that the board bubble. They get into this bubble and it's safe and it's just govern, just follow Robert's rules. And we're not governance consultants, but just follow the process. Mm-hmm. And then the organization can't move and respond. Anyway, I'll pause there, but
yeah, it's like, I loved everything you just said. It's absolutely right, because decision-making is not the same thing as consensus. You do want to talk to a lot of different people, right? But no, it's like somebody has to make the choice. And
you want to consult, you're not looking for consensus, right? You want to listen. That's what associations are great at, like convening disparate voices. Like that is their fundamental skill to solve these problems. Anyway, sort of back.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So they can bring people together, but what they try to avoid too often is they try to avoid conflict. And they definitely avoid risk. And what we need to see is more of not so much conflict as a negative conflict, but conflicting ideas and changing viewpoints and approaches. And also, one of the things that boards seem to overlook is they are not the boss. They are not in charge of running the organization. And that's another problem, is they come into the board thinking, I'm in charge. The CSE, Chief Staff Executive, reports to us, but it's really not their job to run the organization. It's
noses in, fingers out, right?
Right. And they don't want to, because they think, well, it's our organization, but they're really in that stewardship role. And if we go back to what the IRS guidelines say, you have to have 3 people minimum on your board. And the reason you need to have that is they're for oversight, to make sure you are doing the right thing with the resources, not because they're there to run things. And this is a thing that gets repeated across the nonprofit sector, no matter if you're an association or a charity or a foundation or whatever kind of 501c you are. People think the board is in charge and they're the boss, and they're actually not. That's why you have a staff. And I think a lot of times, if the staff were allowed to really fully do the work of the organization with the direction of the board, which is really the best way to do it, I think we would see some of these things fall away. I think these obstacles would be easier to get around or jump over or hurdle, whatever you want to say, whatever your favorite analogy is, audience, to get around it.
So, what this is making me think of is a bit of a pivot off the conversation. So understanding what, what you and I are sort of thinking in the same way. We've got a risk-averse, structurally burdened in a way organization type. So let's go back to the original question: is, are they still relevant today? Like, is that going to crush them? And I'm going to say yes. Like, it is one of the biggest barriers to growth, and you will slowly attrite. Like, I see this strategically for organizations. And the other thing, and so how do I see this? We just recently did a study, and association leaders and C-suite self-reported that only 7% of them have a like a vision that helps them see through and beyond the next number of years. And I think that is symbolic of the challenge, because they're managing the day-to-day and risk, and it takes guts to see through and beyond and say, where are our members going to be, or where is our profession, trade, fill in the blank group going to be, and where do we need to move to be with them? And of course, no one's got a crystal ball, but I think the vision setting exercise is too short-changed because it's uncomfortable, and people who aren't incentivized to take risk won't do it. And it's a real strategic problem. And you can exemplify this with any of the listeners. Look at yours or look at any other associations, and cover over the name of the association and look at their vision and say, is it specific and is it long? Many of them are very generic because they're safe, and it's underpinned by this consensus mindset as well. So I think it's emblematic of the resiliency problem that associations are having a hard time elongating their view. Now, we're in a crazy world. I argue you need a longer view in this crazy world, that in fact, the short-termism is very, very negative. Yes, do you have to respond? Yes, do you have to realize that conditions are changing? But the meaning, and go back to what you said, no mission, no margin. Or no margin, no mission, rather. Do you know where you're going and what, like the Simon Sinek why? Do you know why you exist? And when you lose that and just start delivering stuff, you're then competing with YouTube. You're then competing with Reddit. You're then competing with private membership groups, or in a lot of professions, medical is legal and engineering. We see it everywhere. They're competing more and more with large corporations who are delivering education, who are delivering all of the services that typically have come from. So I just think when you lose that long vision, and only 7% saying, wow, we've got a banger of a vision, that is emblematic of the tension I think we're talking about.
Yeah, and I agree with you again, 100%. We need that longer term view. We do have to deal with the short term. I tend to do planning in 3-month increments. So quarterly, like let's look at this quarter, let's look at next quarter. And that's fine for planning. But when you want and you want the vision thing though, the vision's longer. And the mission has to be what's informing the vision. Because many times when I work with clients on strategic planning, we talk about mission versus vision, and they'll have a mission and they'll have a vision. And it's like the mission is really what's important. The vision, you don't need one. You don't need a vision statement, but you do need a vision for your future. So, a vision statement is like, what do I want to be when I grow up? It's not really something that is important to promoting your organization. Your mission is why you exist. Your mission is why you're there. Your mission is what's driving you. So your visionary activity should be, where are we going to be in 5 years? What do we want to look like? What do we want to be promoting and doing? What's our voice? What's the stand we're going to take in that future? And that's really what we need to focus on, and not just have like, oh, well, we have a vision statement. And mission statements do not need to be long. I see a lot of mission statements are like a whole paragraph, and it's like, it should be like one sentence, like, we're here to make lawyers be better lawyers. That's your mission.
I agree with you. We differ in our practice. We do try to elongate the vision to help them see what I call through and beyond the variability of the life we lead. And to me, that helps get at the focus on the why. And we do that with two main exercises. One is what we call the wicked problems exercise. And if you go back to my theory, for what it's worth, of people get together mostly to solve a problem. Doctors get together because they don't have enough credibility, or there's bad actors and they want to distinguish themselves, or they need better CE, or they need better financial service, and on and on and on. So that's fine, but what's the wicked problem today? What is the wicked problem that it's very complex, but it's dogging your people? It helps you illuminate a vision, saying, if in 20 years, and this is the question, so I'll save all your listeners consulting time with me anyway. It goes like this: in 20 years, and I challenge boards to say, the graduating class of 2026 is sitting in your seats 20 years from now. What don't you want them to be talking about? What have you been talking about for the last 20 years that you wish you could not talk about? So it helps to sort of elongate that vision in a risk safe way, and start saying, oh, maybe this is something that's really important to us. So we do try to elongate the vision a little bit more than you, but I understand why. And I love the rolling 3 months for planning, by the way. I think that's not a strategic vision to us. That's
right. No, exactly. We agree. Actually, that's my point. It's like planning is short increments. Planning is task oriented. It's
Bingo.
not long-term oriented. It's how are we going to get through this month? What
And
do
I
we
think
have
there's
to
a lot
do
of
today?
I think there's a lot of confusion out there about that,
Yeah.
actually, Cecilia. I think people don't feel they can have a long-term strategy, but again, it gets wrapped up in that consensus model of like, well, how can I possibly get people to agree? And the world is changing so fast, but planning is a different function. So 100% with you.
Yeah, that's really so, and that's really the thing. Like we talk about strategic planning, and it's really I've said this a couple of times, but it's the common language we use. But to me, it should be like goal fulfillment or mission
Mm-hmm.
fulfillment. It's not strategic, because then it becomes about strategy instead of what are we trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And strategy is great. You need that to reach your goals, to reach your mission, to fulfill that long-term vision you have for the organization. But it's not all about that plan. It's about where do we want to be? And
That's it.
then the short-term part, the task-oriented tactical
How
part
do you get there?
is, yeah, that's the planning part. And that's where boards get caught up in the wrong direction as well. Instead of thinking about the strategy of how are we going to achieve this goal, which is a bigger, broader viewpoint,
Yeah.
they want to get into tactics. And it's like, that's not your job. Your job is strategy and vision and direction and goals. What are we trying to achieve? And then it's up to the staff to come up with a way to accomplish that. And I think in a volunteer driven organization, like some organizations are small, they are actually managed by volunteers. They don't necessarily have any staff.
It's tough.
That's
Yeah.
different. They're going to be in the middle of it, but then maybe they want to take a step back. I worked with a client last year who the board had been running the association until they found a new chief staff executive. And then they said, you know what, now we want to take that step back. We don't want to be tactical anymore. We want to be strategic. Help us change our mindset. And a lot of that's that mindset. You've touched on this several times about risk.
It's
People
risk.
don't want to take that risk because they're like, well, it's like during the COVID lockdown. Well, I'm not spending reserve money during the COVID lockdown. I'm not spending money on my watch. It's not going to be on me. And so instead, people are wiping out entire membership departments at membership associations. And I'm like, it's not the database. It's those people who make sure people are engaged and getting a good experience, and you're there to help them when they need it. So that's like a negative, obviously a negative reaction. It's not a growth reaction. Growth reaction would be like, well, my husband runs a nonprofit group called National Taxpayers Union. And when the lockdown happened, they just completely changed the way they did everything. And guess what? They came out great on the other side.
Yeah, it's that innovation ability to respond. And COVID, although receding happily into into the distance.
Yeah.
But when we recall what happened, how much transformation happened. I mean, lots of terrible things happened, but I always called it the golden age of associations. One, there was an immediate need because people have professionals, trades had a problem, which was, what do I do? How do I keep doing what I do? How do I keep helping the people I help? How do I keep running the businesses I do? How do I keep doing this? And associations realized it was that they have a problem and we're the go-to, that coming together. So that was one reason there was golden age. And then for some of them who, like your husband's organization, who retooled and took the opportunity to say, let's just do this differently and not go back. I think there were some amazing innovations there. One additional thing. We talked a lot about the blind spot of the risk aversion of the board.
Mm-hmm.
That structural challenge that I set up, where the perspective collapsing, the members, the customers, the owner is the governor, is the member, is the customer, is it's so conflated, also hits on another blind spot. And this is, I think, a power tool in what you were talking about and trying to get that growth and responding to, like, don't cut the membership department. It sounds counterintuitive because I think associations listen to their members all day long. Mm-hmm. The ones who call, the ones who show up at events, the ones who renew, the ones who they email back and forth with, they are swimming in membership perspective in a
Mm-hmm.
way. They do their annual survey. It's often backwards looking. How did we do? But it can collapse. And then what happens is they can speak to what I call the usual suspects. And a lot of association leaders listening to this will know. It's like, oh, it's the same 500 people who show up. You've got a membership of 3,500 people, and the same 500 people are coming to are really engaged.
Right.
And that also can get them engaged in the surveys. It can skew the organization's ability to see what they need to do to respond, like you said, like, and where to invest next and where the problems really are. And I think how the greater discipline, and we do a lot of, we call it the voice of the future member, spending more time listening to members who aren't with you, who have left you, who've never heard of you. That takes more work, but it's more valuable. It also hurts more because they're probably saying things that are like, well, we didn't like this, or we don't like this about you, or we didn't see it, or we didn't get it. But you've got to listen to that outside of the bubble. And so I just wanted to bring that up because the way you were talking about, boards can just say, well, just get rid of the membership department. I never need them. It's like, whoa.
I know. I was stunned when that started happening. Like you, I'm glad that's all pretty much in the rearview mirror now. But, the fact that we're not talking about like 501c3 social service group saying, well, we're going to get rid of the PR department right now because we have to cut. We need the money to help the people we help. I mean, but if you're a membership association and you eliminate the membership department because the board thinks it's all about the database, first of all, you probably need a new board of directors if that's their attitude. But second of all, you're right about talking to the members who aren't happy. I belong to an association where they just ignore the unhappy members, like people who are currently members, and say, hey, couldn't we do this differently? Why can't we try this? This isn't working anymore. They shut you down. They don't want to hear it. And that's even worse than
it's deadly. It's a real structural problem. And it's a big problem for getting the growth and that resiliency that we're talking about.
Yeah, but I think before, gosh, this has been like such an exciting conversation for me. I'm just really enjoying it. And I want to make sure to ask you before we do have to wrap up the episode, we're not there quite yet. Yeah. What is your definition of relevance for an organization?
Yeah. Relevance is solving a problem more efficiently and effectively than if they did it on their own. And how the proof test of that. So that's how I define it. And then you're like, well, how do I get there? So I call it the can opener question is, if your association didn't exist today, what would happen? And you ask that to association leaders or board members or whatever the configuration. And often it becomes clarifying where the point of resiliency is. And sometimes they say nothing, as in no one would care, or our members would join these other organizations. That is illuminating to where your resiliency is. Or they say, no, we would be instantly recreated. Then I say, why? And that puts your finger quickly on their value proposition. So a resilient association is one that is hyper-focused on solving the problems and opportunities more efficiently than if they tried to do it on their own. And so that's how we boil it down. What do you think of that? How do you define resiliency?
Well, that's much. Well, resilience is being able to respond and not freezing. And in my opinion, it's using that experience. You have to go through bad things to build resilience. And one of the issues with building resilience is people don't want to be uncomfortable. But you have to be uncomfortable. You have to hear some critiques. It doesn't have to be criticism, but you have to hear some critiques. And if people are honestly saying to you, we've been doing it this way for 15 years, but it's not working anymore, and here's some ideas, you definitely need to hear that. You can't just say, well, it's what we do and it's how we do it, so stop. But resilience is something that you build by you take that pause. If something goes wrong, you take that pause and then you say, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And then you go forward. And that's really resilience. Okay. If you don't have resilience, you're going to curl up in a ball and not move again. And that's not resilience. That's the opposite. But the way I define relevance is having what people need when they need it. And that can be anything from solving a problem to I need the CLE or CME or CE, or I need to connect with other people in my profession because I have a question I can't answer. That to me is relevance, but relevance is also really tied up in meaning and value. And one of the things that I say sometimes that people kind of stare at me or they're like, I don't want to hear that, is every member belongs to a different association. So you might be an association with 10,000 members. Well, guess what? They all belong
You're
to
not
10,000 different associations because they're experiencing it differently. They have a
there.
different value definition or proposition that they're looking for. And we can identify a base value proposition. Like if you join the American Medical Association, you will be joined with other physicians across the country helping you answer these questions in today's healthcare environment. Great. All right, that's your baseline. But what does a laryngologist need versus an orthopedist versus a surgeon? And that's where you start finding different value definitions and value propositions. But also, one of the things we have to deal with, it's why we call it the relationship industry, is people are investing themselves in the association, especially if they get into the volunteer leadership track. It's an emotional investment, a time investment, an energy investment. So we're seeing that it's got to have meaning as well for people to get involved in an association. And that also contributes to your relevance factor. Because if what you're doing has meaning to people, they're going to show up, they're going to support you, they're going to participate. They're going to tell you when things might be going in the wrong direction. That's why I tell people, if people get mad, if they're angry, that means they care. If they didn't care, they wouldn't say anything. They would just walk away.
Right.
They'd go somewhere else. They would find a new group or start
silently on. Yeah.
So
it's what, just as a last thought, what they care about, and we do a lot of research, what across the board at the 50,000 foot level, everyone cares about is their version of success. And that varies by profession, industry, location, what the exact definition of that. So if you're paying attention to what is standing in the way of success, and that what is standing in their way changes over time, policies change, geographies change, economics change, society changes, technology changes. That changes over time. So staying with it makes you resilient and relevant. But it's really what will motivate them to care about you is if you demonstrate that you care about them by knowing what's standing in their way of what they're trying to achieve. Are they trying to become millionaires? Are they just trying to help people in their community? Are they trying to have the best work-life balance going? However that's defined. I encourage every association to find that for your people. And
wow, that great advice. That's exactly it. We want people to be engaged, and we say engagement, and then we try to measure it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can really get a good measure of engagement. And I think people tend to look at metrics versus like, are people actually, happy or positive about being involved? And I think that's really more the measure of engagement than like how many clicks or how many times they bought something, or how many webinars they participated in.
I'm in agreement with you. Yeah, it's not that those are indicators, and they're a measure of certain other types of performance, but that's not true engagement. I have one, as I've interrupted you, but I have one that we use to measure engagement. If I had to pick one metric for every association, how fast do they renew?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah,
that's really
like, are you chasing them for 8 months? Like, and once you fix your processes, if you're fixing your processes and you're still chasing them for 8 months out of the next 12 months to get them to renew, or when you send them one reminder, are they saying yes? Watch that metric. It is just, if I had to pick one though, but that's it.
I agree with you. I used to be in the membership department at the American Academy of Otolaryngology, head and neck surgery. It's a really long name. And at the time, I think we had about 10,000 members, and I don't know how many they have today. I'm sure it's a lot more. But we would send out the invoices. We got like a 70% renewal on the first invoice.
Amazing.
And so that shows you people really found it valuable. It was a good organization. I'm sure it's even better now. People got something very valuable from that. And then we picked everybody up by the third invoice, everybody else who was going to renew. And by the fourth invoice, we're like, well, sorry, you're not going to renew, but we'll see you next time.
Save yourself a bunch of time and energy because they're not really with you. So
they're not going to do it. Wow. But oh my gosh, I can't believe this has been such fantastic, energetic, really diving in deep conversation. So thank you so much for joining me, Christine. And I want to ask you for the audience, what is the one thought you'd like them to take away today as they consider relevance in the 21st century for associations? And then how could they get in touch with you if they'd like to connect further on that?
So parting thought is on relevancy is I think associations still have a function. Don't listen to any voices saying associations are dying breeds. I think the need to get people together exists. Yours may be under challenge. So try that existential proof test of saying, if your association went away today, what would happen? And then go from there. Start that journey to find your relevance from there. It's a clarifying exercise. And I know, and I'm so grateful that associations exist in our society. So I want every association leader to be relevant and resilient and strong. And I'd love to carry on this conversation. I too have really enjoyed it, Cecilia. So thank you for having me. And anyone who hears this who wants to reach out, best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Christine Saunders. Track me down. I work for a company called Halmyre, Halmyre, or you can find us on our website at halmyre.com. Really grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. This has been a great episode, and I hope you come back in the future.
I'd love to be back. So thanks very much. We'll see you again.
Excellent. Maybe we'll talk about de Tocqueville. I studied political science.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
We should have. Let's do that. Love it.
It's interesting, yeah, because political science actually helped me a lot with association management.
I did political philosophy. I'm with you there, but how they fit into society and the governance structures that we spent some time talking about. Lovely. Fun.
Excellent. Okay, well, we'll book that. So, well, we do have to go rogue for now because this is a deep conversation. We could keep going, but we're going to go rogue for now. But we'll be back next time with another exciting episode. So, quick reminder, if you haven't followed us or subscribed yet on your favorite service, please take a moment and do that so you don't miss any more of these cool conversations we're having as we head toward episode 350 later this year. So if you would like to find this podcast episode featuring Christine and share it with your friends and colleagues, you can find that on our website, roguetulips.com. Go to our podcast page. You can find this episode and our library of past episodes. We've had a lot of really good conversations, so check those out. If you would like to know what's on my mind this week, which, as I always say, I don't know what I'm going to talk about either, check out the blog and see what's on my mind and see if it gets you thinking. You can learn more about our education program on the education page. We're offering ethics through the summer, and then we'll be kicking off our CAE prep courses this fall, so watch for updates on that. And check out our adaptive leadership course if you're looking to do some self-guided study with facilitator guidance. And in closing, check out our services page and see if we can work together. We'd love to have a conversation with you about how we can help your organization bloom outside the box. And that's it for this week. So on behalf of Christine and myself, we'll see you next time. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together. That's it for this week. I hope you really loved this episode as much as I did. Thanks for listening. Learn more about how our experience and knowledge at Rogue Tulips can give your organization the strategic edge to reach its goals. Check out our website at roguetulips.com. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can work together.